I thought I knew what betrayal felt like, until I walked into my own bedroom and found my husband of 20 years in bed with our 19-year-old daughter, and she was 2 months pregnant with his child. My name is Nikki, and 3 months ago I was living what I thought was the American dream in our colonial house in Westchester County, New York. I was 42, worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized tech company, and had what everyone called the perfect family. My husband David was a successful insurance broker. Our daughter Emma was a sophomore at SUNY Purchase studying art, and we just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary with a weekend in the Hamptons. I posted the pictures on Facebook like any proud wife would. David's arm around me on the beach, both of us laughing at some joke I can't even remember now. The comments poured in. Relationship goals. You too are so blessed. If only they knew. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday in late June. I'd taken a half day to surprise David with lunch from his favorite Italian place, Marcello's, the one where we had our first date back in 2003. I used my key to let myself into his downtown office, expecting to find him hunched over insurance claims like always. Instead, his secretary Janet looked flustered when she saw me, her face going pale like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh, Mrs. Patterson, David stepped out for a meeting," she stammered, but I could hear his voice coming from behind his closed office door. Not just talking, but laughing. That low, intimate laugh I thought was reserved for me. I brushed it off then. We all have work friendships, right? But over the next few weeks, the signs multiplied like cracks in a windshield. David started coming home later, claiming new clients needed evening meetings. He'd shower immediately when he walked in the door, something he'd never done in 20 years. His phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter during dinner, was now always face down and within arm's reach. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague, rehearsed. "Same old stuff, honey. You know how it is." Emma had graduated high school that spring and was living at home for the summer before returning to college. She'd always been Daddy's little girl, but their relationship had shifted into something that made me uncomfortable in ways I couldn't articulate. They'd have these long, private conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered the room. She started dressing differently around the house, wearing these thin tank tops and short shorts that seemed designed to catch attention. When I mentioned it to David, he just shrugged. "She's 19, Nikki. She's not a little girl anymore." The night everything changed was a scorching Thursday in July. I'd driven up to Albany for a client presentation that got canceled last minute, so I headed home 3 hours early. It was barely 2 p.m. when I pulled into our driveway, and I noticed Emma's Honda Civic parked crooked, like she'd been in a hurry. David's Mercedes was there too, which was strange because he should have been at the office. I figured maybe he was sick and had come home early. I entered through the kitchen, calling out hello, but got no response. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't name. I kicked off my heels and padded upstairs in my stockings, planning to change out of my business suit. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar, which was unusual because David always kept it closed during the day to keep the air conditioning from escaping. That's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Emma's voice, breathless and unmistakable, saying, "God, I love you so much." And David's response, gravelly with desire, "I love you too, baby girl, so much." My hand was on the doorknob before my brain could process what I was hearing. I pushed it open maybe 6 inches, just enough to see our king-sized bed, the one David and I had picked out for our 15th anniversary. The white comforter with the blue flowers that I'd washed 1,000 times was tangled at the foot of the bed. And there they were. My husband, my daughter, together in a way that shattered every foundation of my world. I must have made a sound, a gasp or a sob, because they both turned toward the door. Emma's face went white as paper, her hands scrambling to cover herself with our pillows, the same pillows I rested my head on every night. David's expression cycled through shock, guilt, and then something that looked almost like relief. "Nikki," he said, his voice steady in a way that terrified me. "We need to talk." I ran. I actually turned and ran down the stairs like a teenager, grabbing my keys and purse, not even bothering with my shoes. I drove to the Starbucks on Main Street and sat in my car in the parking lot, hyperventilating into a paper bag I found in my glove compartment. Other customers walked past my windows, going about their normal Thursday afternoons, buying their lattes and muffins, completely unaware that my entire reality had just exploded. When I finally went home 2 hours later, David was waiting in the living room, fully dressed, looking like he was preparing for a board meeting. Emma was nowhere to be seen. He gestured to the couch where we'd watched Netflix together just 2 nights before, and I sat down automatically, my body moving without input from my brain. "How long?" I whispered. "Since her 18th birthday," he said, and the casualness in his voice made me want to scream. "It just happened, Nikki. We didn't plan it." 18 months. For 18 months, while I was packing Emma's lunch for her senior year, helping her with college applications, planning her graduation party, my husband had been grooming and then sleeping with our daughter. While I was celebrating our 19th anniversary, posting pictures of our perfect family on social media, they were betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. "She's pregnant," he continued, like he was discussing the weather. 2 months, we've been to the doctor." The room started spinning. I gripped the arm of our sectional sofa, the one we'd bought at Ashley Furniture when we first moved to this house, back when Emma was 3 and would build pillow forts in the corner. Now she was 19 and pregnant with her father's child. "We want to be together," David said. "Really together. Emma's dropping out of college, and we're going to move somewhere we can start fresh. Maybe North Carolina, where nobody knows us." I stared at this man I'd loved since I was 22. This man I'd built a life with, shared dreams with, planned retirement with. His dark hair was graying at the temples in a way I'd always found distinguished. His brown eyes, the same eyes I'd looked into when we exchanged vows at St. Patrick's Cathedral, were completely foreign to me now. "What about us?" I asked. "What about our marriage, our life, everything we built together?" "Nikki, be realistic," he said, and I heard impatience creeping into his voice. "We've been growing apart for years. We barely have sex anymore. We don't talk about anything meaningful. Emma and I have something real, something passionate. I know it's hard to understand, but this is love." That's when I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was screaming until my throat bled. My husband was explaining to me how his affair with our teenage daughter was actually love, while sitting on the couch where the 3 of us used to watch movies together when she was little. "I want you both out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Tonight." "Nikki, don't be dramatic. We can handle this like adults. The divorce will be simple. We'll split everything 50-50, and you can keep the house. Emma and I just need some time to figure things out." The entitlement in his voice, the assumption that I would just quietly accept this betrayal and hand over half of everything I'd worked for, snapped something inside me. But instead of exploding, I felt myself go very calm, very cold. "Get out," I repeated. "Both of you now." They left that night, David loading his Mercedes with suitcases while Emma couldn't even look at me. I watched from the upstairs window as they drove away, probably to some hotel, planning their new life together while I stood alone in the house we'd called home for 15 years. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started making phone calls. First, to my sister Rachel in Boston, who listened to the whole story without interrupting and then said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but listen carefully. Don't do anything stupid. Document everything. Get a lawyer. Get tested for STDs, and remember that revenge is a dish best served cold. Rachel had gone through a messy divorce 5 years earlier, and she'd learned the hard way that emotions make you sloppy. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to be strategic. My second call was to Margaret Stevenson, the best divorce attorney in Westchester County. She'd handled my friend Carol's divorce the year before, and Carol had walked away with everything while her cheating ex-husband got visitation with his kids and a monthly alimony check. Margaret's retainer was $10,000, money I pulled from our joint savings account before David could think to freeze it. "This is going to be ugly," Margaret told me during our first meeting in her glass-walled office overlooking the Hudson River. "The incest angle makes it criminal in New York State. We can use that, but we need evidence. Right now it's your word against theirs, and they'll claim you're a scorned wife making things up." That's when my real education began. I learned about private investigators, phone records, credit card statements, social media forensics. I learned that David had been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms during Emma's spring break, when she was supposedly visiting her roommate in Albany. I learned that he'd opened a separate checking account 3 months earlier and had been transferring money there in small amounts to avoid triggering bank notifications. I learned that Emma had been posting cryptic messages on her Instagram about true love, and age is just a number for months, messages I'd scrolled past without understanding their meaning. The private investigator Margaret recommended was a woman named Susan Torres, a former NYPD detective who specialized in infidelity cases. She was expensive, $500 a day plus expenses, but she was thorough. Within a week, she documented David and Emma's daily routine. They were staying at the Extended Stay America on Route 9, paying week by week while they looked for an apartment. David went to work every morning like nothing had changed, while Emma spent her days shopping for maternity clothes and looking at apartments in Asheville, North Carolina, on her laptop in the hotel lobby. "They're not being careful," Susan told me, sliding a manila folder across the table at the diner where we met each Tuesday. "He's still using the credit cards tied to your joint account. She's posting their location on social media. They think you're just going to roll over and accept this." But I wasn't rolling over. I was planning. The first part of my plan was financial. With Margaret's help, I filed for an emergency freeze on our joint assets, citing the criminal nature of David's relationship with Emma. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who looked physically disgusted when Margaret explained the situation, granted the freeze immediately. David's access to our savings accounts, investment portfolio, and even his business credit cards was cut off that afternoon. He called me screaming at 6 p.m. "What the hell did you do, Nikki? I can't access any of our accounts." "They're not our accounts anymore," I said calmly. "They're my accounts until the court decides otherwise. You should have thought about that before you decided to start a new life with our daughter." "You can't do this. I have bills, business expenses, employees to pay." "Then maybe you should have considered the consequences before you threw away 20 years of marriage for a teenager." I hung up and blocked his number. The second part of my plan was social. David had always cared deeply about his reputation in our community. He was on the board of the Rotary Club, coached Little League on weekends, played golf at the country club with potential clients every Saturday morning. His insurance business depended on trust and respectability. I started making strategic phone calls. I called David's business partner, Jim Morrison, and told him the whole story. Jim was a father of 3 daughters himself, and I could hear the disgust in his voice when I explained what David had done. "Jesus Christ, Nikki, I'm so sorry. Listen, I'll need to think about how this affects the business. David's clients, they trust him with their family's financial security, if this gets out." I called the president of the Rotary Club and explained why David would no longer be attending meetings. I called the Little League commissioner and suggested they might want to review David's background check. I called the country club and canceled our family membership, making sure to explain exactly why. Each call was harder than the last, because I had to tell the story over and over, relive the humiliation, watch people's voices change from sympathy to disgust to fear that they might somehow be associated with this scandal. But each call was also another nail in the coffin of David's old life. The third part of my plan was the hardest, because it involved Emma. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. And some stubborn part of my heart still loved the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her the same bedtime story every night for 2 years straight. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone who could betray her own mother in the most devastating way possible. I drove to Emma's college and met with her academic advisor, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, who remembered Emma from her freshman orientation. I explained the situation in clinical terms, focusing on the facts rather than the emotions. Emma was pregnant with her father's child. She was planning to drop out of school to move to another state with him. As her mother and the person responsible for her tuition payments, I was officially withdrawing my financial support. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patterson," Dr. Wells said, her face pale with shock. I've never encountered anything like this in 20 years of academic advising. Emma was doing so well, too. Dean's List last semester. "She made her choice," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Now she has to live with the consequences." That afternoon, I drove to our bank and canceled the credit card I'd given Emma for emergencies. I called our family cell phone plan and had her line disconnected. I went through our house and packed up everything that belonged to her, every stuffed animal and poster and piece of clothing, and donated it all to Goodwill. I kept one thing, a photo of Emma at age 5, missing her 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera while holding a fish she'd caught on our vacation to Lake George. I put it in my dresser drawer, a reminder of who she used to be before David corrupted her. By the end of August, my plan was working. David's business was hemorrhaging clients as word spread through our tight-knit community. The country club had quietly asked him to resign his membership. The Rotary Club had voted him out. His own parents, who lived in a retirement community in Florida, had stopped taking his calls after I sent them a carefully worded letter explaining why they wouldn't be seeing their granddaughter anymore. Emma was struggling too, according to Susan's surveillance reports. The extended stay America was expensive, eating through David's remaining cash reserves. She'd gained weight from the pregnancy and stress eating, and spent most of her days crying in the hotel room while David was at work trying to salvage what was left of his business. The glamorous new life they'd envisioned was turning into a nightmare of financial pressure and social isolation. That's when I played my final card. I'd been documenting everything Susan discovered, every hotel receipt and restaurant charge and gas station purchase, building a comprehensive timeline of David and Emma's relationship. Margaret had been working with prosecutors in the district attorney's office, preparing a case for statutory rape and incest. In New York State, even though Emma was over 18 when their relationship became physical, the fact that she was his daughter made it a felony regardless of consent. But I wanted more than just criminal charges. I wanted David to understand exactly how completely he destroyed his life for a fantasy that could never work. I hired a different private investigator, one who specialized in social media and digital forensics. For $1,500, he was able to recover deleted text messages from Emma's phone records, messages that painted a clear picture of how David had groomed her throughout her senior year of high school. Messages where he told her she was more mature than other girls her age, more beautiful than her mother, more understanding of his needs. Messages where he gradually escalated from inappropriate compliments to sexual conversation, to actual planning of their physical relationship. I also discovered something David didn't know I knew. Emma had been keeping a journal throughout their relationship, documenting her feelings about the situation. Susan had photographed several pages during one of her surveillance operations when Emma left the journal open on the hotel room desk. The entries were heartbreaking and damning in equal measure. Emma wrote about feeling guilty for betraying me, but also about feeling chosen and special because David had picked her over his wife. She wrote about her fears that people would judge them, but also about her excitement at playing house with her father. She wrote about morning sickness and pregnancy hormones making her emotional, and about starting to realize that David saw her more as a replacement for me than as a person in her own right. The final entry Susan photographed was dated just 2 days before my meeting with David at the hotel. Emma had written, "I think I made a terrible mistake. David keeps talking about me like I'm Mom when she was young, and I'm starting to understand that he doesn't actually love me. He loves the idea of having a young wife who won't challenge him or have her own opinions. When I try to talk about my own dreams or what I want, he gets annoyed and changes the subject. I don't know how to get out of this now. I'm pregnant and everyone already knows, and I can never go back to my old life. I think I understand now why Mom looked so sad all the time during my senior year. I think she knew something was wrong but didn't know what. I wish I could take it all back." Reading that entry, I felt the first crack in the wall of anger I'd built around my heart. Emma was still my daughter, still a teenager who'd made a catastrophic mistake and was beginning to understand the price she'd have to pay for it. I decided to make David an offer. I asked Margaret to arrange a meeting at her office on a Friday afternoon in early September. David showed up looking haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. The confident man who'd sat in our living room explaining his love for our daughter had been replaced by someone who looked desperate and cornered. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, sliding a manila folder across the conference table. "You're going to sign these divorce papers, which give me the house, 70% of our assets, and full control of Emma's education fund. You're going to transfer your half of the business to Jim Morrison for $1, which gets you out of the partnership without dragging him down with your scandal. And you're going to disappear from Emma's life completely." David stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Nikki, you can't seriously expect me to give up everything. And Emma, I can't just abandon her. She's carrying my child." "Your child," I repeated, letting the disgust show in my voice. "Your daughter is carrying her father's child, David. Do you understand how sick that is? Do you understand that you've destroyed a 19-year-old girl's entire life for your own selfish fantasies?" "It's not like that," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We love each other, it's real." I opened the folder and pulled out photocopies of Emma's journal entries. Is it real when she writes about feeling trapped? Is it real when she says you treat her like a replacement for me instead of her own person? Is it real when she says she wishes she could take it all back? David's face went white as he read his daughter's words, her growing realization that their relationship was based on manipulation and fantasy rather than genuine love. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him look truly ashamed. "She wrote this," he whispered. 3 days ago," I said. "She's miserable, David. You've made her miserable. The pregnancy hormones are making her sick. She has no friends because everyone knows what she did, and she's starting to understand that you groomed her into this situation. She's 19 years old and her life is over before it really began." I pulled out the next set of papers. "These are the criminal charges the DA is preparing to file against you. Incest in the 2nd degree, which carries a maximum sentence of 7 years in state prison. Your business is gone, your reputation is destroyed, and your daughter is realizing that you manipulated her into ruining her own life. This is what your great love story has accomplished." David was crying now, ugly sobs that shook his shoulders. "What do you want from me, Nikki? What do you want me to do?" "I want you to disappear," I said. "I want you to sign these papers, take what I'm willing to give you, and start a new life somewhere far away from here. I want you to leave Emma alone so she can try to rebuild her life without your toxic influence. And I want you to remember every day for the rest of your life that you had a good woman who loved you and a daughter who trusted you, and you threw it all away for a fantasy that could never work." The final part of my offer was the cruelest, but also the most necessary. "If you sign these papers and agree to my terms, I'll help Emma. I'll pay for therapy to help her understand how you manipulated her. I'll support her through the pregnancy and help her decide what to do about the baby. I'll even consider letting her come home eventually if she can prove she understands the magnitude of what she did and commits to making amends, but only if you disappear completely. As long as you're in her life, you're a reminder of the worst decision she'll ever make." David signed the papers that day. He took the $20,000 I was willing to give him, packed his remaining belongings, and drove out of town that weekend. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Arizona and was working as a claims adjuster for a small insurance company, using his mother's maiden name to try to escape his past. Emma came to see me the following Tuesday. She looked terrible, pale and thin despite the pregnancy weight, with dark circles under her eyes that reminded me of myself after sleepless nights when she was a colicky baby. She sat in our living room, on the same couch where David had explained their great love to me, and cried for 20 minutes before she could speak. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "I know that's not enough, but I don't know what else to say. I ruined everything." I looked at my daughter, this girl I'd raised and loved and protected for 19 years, who'd betrayed me in the worst way possible but was still, somehow, my child. The anger was still there, would probably always be there, but it was mixed now with something else. Pity, maybe, or grief for the innocence she'd lost and could never get back. "Yes," I said, "you did ruin everything. But you were also manipulated by someone who was supposed to protect you, someone who spent years grooming you for this. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it explains it." We talked for 3 hours that day, and for the first time I understood how David had slowly eroded Emma's boundaries throughout her senior year. How he'd started with complaints about our marriage, making her feel like she was his confidant and ally. How he'd gradually escalated to inappropriate compliments about her appearance and maturity. How he'd convinced her that their relationship was special and romantic rather than criminal and destructive. "I thought I was so mature," Emma sobbed. "I thought I understood love better than other people my age. But I was just a kid, wasn't I? I was just a stupid kid who believed everything he told me." "Yes," I said again, "you were. But you're not a kid anymore, Emma. You're about to become a mother yourself. So the question now is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?" We spent the next month talking through her options. Keeping the baby would mean raising her father's child, explaining to him or her someday why they had no grandfather on one side of the family. It would mean Emma's entire future being defined by this mistake, making it impossible for her to move forward and build a healthy life. Adoption would mean carrying the pregnancy to term and then giving up the child, but it would also give the baby a chance at a normal life with parents who weren't connected to this scandal. Emma chose adoption. We found a lovely couple in Vermont, Sarah and Michael, who'd been trying to have children for 8 years. They were both teachers, kind and patient people who understood the sensitive nature of the situation and agreed to a closed adoption that would protect Emma's privacy. They paid for her medical expenses and provided emotional support throughout the remaining months of her pregnancy, treating her with more compassion than she probably deserved but certainly needed. The baby was born in February, a healthy girl with David's dark hair and Emma's green eyes. Emma held her for exactly 1 hour, whispering apologies and promises that she'd made this sacrifice so the baby could have a better life than Emma could provide. Then she handed her daughter to Sarah and Michael and walked away from the hospital with empty arms and a chance to start over. Emma is in therapy now, working with a counselor who specializes in sexual abuse and manipulation. She's enrolled in community college, taking general education classes while she figures out what she wants to do with her life. She lives in a small apartment downtown, works part-time at a coffee shop, and calls me every Sunday afternoon to check in. Our relationship will never be what it was before, but it's something. She's working to understand how she was victimized while also taking responsibility for her choices. She's growing up, finally, in a way that's painful but necessary. As for me, I'm rebuilding too. I sold the house in Westchester and bought a smaller place in Connecticut, somewhere without memories of David and Emma's betrayal lurking in every room. I got a new job with a marketing firm in Stamford, better pay, and more responsibility than my old position. I started going to therapy myself, learning how to trust my instincts again and recognize the warning signs I'd missed in my marriage. The divorce was finalized in March, and I walked away with most of our assets and a sense of justice that felt better than I'd expected. David had to pay for his choices with his business, his reputation, his relationship with his daughter, and his future. Emma had to pay for her choices with a pregnancy that derailed her college plans and a betrayal that cost her relationship with me. I had to pay too, with the loss of the family I'd thought I had and the naive trust I'd carried for 20 years. But I also gained something valuable from this nightmare. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, that I can be strategic and ruthless when necessary, and that revenge doesn't have to be emotional and messy to be effective. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure people face the logical consequences of their actions. David destroyed his life for a fantasy, and now he gets to live with that choice every day. Emma betrayed her own mother for a man who was using her, and now she has to work to earn back trust and respect. I was betrayed by the two people I loved most in the world, but I survived it and came out stronger on the other side. The hardest part wasn't the revenge or the legal battles or even the social humiliation. The hardest part was accepting that the life I'd built was based on lies, that the man I'd loved was capable of unthinkable selfishness, and that the daughter I'd raised could betray me so completely. But once I accepted those truths, I could move forward with clarity and purpose instead of denial and hope. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled the situation, if I think I was too harsh on David and Emma. My answer is always the same. They made adult choices, and adults have to face adult consequences. David chose to pursue a sexual relationship with his teenage daughter, destroying his marriage and his family in the process. Emma chose to betray her mother and sleep with her married father. These weren't mistakes or accidents. They were deliberate decisions that hurt innocent people and violated fundamental moral boundaries. I gave them both exactly what they deserved. The logical consequences of their actions, served cold and methodically and without mercy. David wanted a new life free from the responsibilities and compromises of marriage, so I gave him exactly that, along with the social and financial consequences that come with abandoning your family for your teenage daughter. Emma wanted to play grown-up games with serious consequences, so I treated her like the adult she claimed to be and let her face those consequences without protection. The best revenge isn't always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it's simply stepping back and letting people destroy themselves while you document the damage and protect your own interests. Sometimes it's making sure that actions have consequences, that betrayal has a price, and that people who hurt you don't get to walk away unscathed. If you're facing betrayal in your own life, Here are 3 things that saved me. First, document everything before you react emotionally, because evidence is more powerful than anger. Second, protect your financial assets immediately, because betrayers will often try to leave you with nothing while they start their new lives. Third, remember that the best revenge is living well while they face the consequences of their choices. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about surviving betrayal and coming out stronger.